right, folks. So this will be the final part of what we'll call the Ana Defection trilogy. We're not going to milk this show after show after show, but we did think it was worth covering this one more time as Cenk Uygur himself chimed in and addressed the TYT audience about the core principles of the TYT network. This is sped up slightly for time's sake. It runs a little under 5 minutes. We'll stop and start along the way, but this is Cenk.
Did you give him that hamster voice in tribute to our funny this week? Speed it up enough to give him the thing going on.
I should have done that, but then it wouldn't have been easy to hear. But here is Cenk Uygur addressing the controversy that has been visited upon his network by a lot of the angry Young Turks fans and members.
And mods.
I wanted to...
And mods. Yeah, some of their mods quit.
Before we do anything else today, I wanted to take a minute out to talk to you guys about what kind of show and network we are, because apparently that some people are questioning it. And so I have clear answers, and then people can make their decisions based on that, okay? So we've been doing this for 21 years, and the entire time we've been progressive and fighting very hard for progressive issues and done a lot of things. I'm not gonna get into our resume of all the great things that mainly our audience has done, because without them, we don't have any power. And those folks have done amazing things in the world, like Launch Just Democrats, et cetera. So,
like Launch Justice Democrats, et cetera. Oh, what an amazing thing that turned out to be. You know, that's what this country really needed, was another progressive PAC. Right? Another PAC that brands itself as a progressive alternative to mainstream Democratic politics. We don't have enough of those.
We needed an organization to elect Nancy Pelosi the next generation.
Right.
That's what we needed. We just needed more diversity, which good job.
Right. Good job. So they helped you fund that. Okay. Great job.
Amazing things in the world, like Launch Just Democrats, et cetera. So we're not going to pop out of a cake in a couple of days and go, ta-da, right-wing pivot. We laid a 21-year bear trap for you guys so that at the end we could do a right-wing pivot and then lose our entire audience.
You know, the thing about this is it is kind of difficult to determine for me who I dislike more, the TYT or the loyal TYT audience.
I think a lot of people are going through that.
Yeah, so like when he gives, like, that was a pretty nice burn there. It's like, well, you think we laid a trap for 21 years and now we're going to pivot to the right wing? Like, I do feel what he's saying there. The problem is, of course, the TYT audience is a product of TYT. And that's been our sort of
Well, that's it. And that's
thesis going through
the Jordan Peterson tweet. What Peterson said was pretty on point. Pretty on point. He said what a lot of us have been saying.
Well, here, I'll say what it is now because I actually have it memorized. He says, your children are hungry and you're on the plate, which is basically what we've been saying.
And then you know, Cenk bloviated a bit to distance himself from Jordan Peterson. I will have none of your support, sir. None of it. But yeah, that landed pretty good because that's that's what we've been saying. They created this atmosphere. They literally created a lot of these people. Welcome to the madhouse that you fostered all these years. Welcome.
Exactly.
The people are like, oh, you guys are grifters. You are denying your audience what you want, what they want. Wait, how would that be a grift? You guys want to go from an incredibly successful progressive show that gets hundreds of millions of views every month to being right-wingers to get no views.
Does it?
If that was true.
Does it?
Yeah.
Still?
Is it still? I mean, maybe. Who knows?
I don't think so. I mean, when you look at their view counts, I'm not buying that.
Yeah, hundreds of millions of views a month. Yeah, they'd have to put out a lot. Maybe counting their affiliate stuff, you know, whatever. But
I mean, these affiliates have been dropping off one by one, right? Like, who's still under their umbrella with like Kyle's not?
Oh, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the Nina Turner show. Although that gets really bad viewer numbers too. I think the Nina Turner show is not doing well. But anyway,
that doesn't surprise me, man. No. She should have run as a third-party candidate.
Exactly.
Why would that be a grift? That's not a grift. That's just a disastrous decision. No, we're doing something radical on this network, and so I want you to understand it. We're allowing for discussion and debate and disagreements. Now, a lot of people don't want that. Like tons of right-wingers go, no, I don't want any of that. I just want Fox News or Newsmax or Tucker Carlson or whoever it is. And I just want him to say the things that I want to hear. And in fact, Fox News got in trouble with them in the Dominion lawsuit because
time out.
Yeah.
Time out.
And this is a lot of his tweets too. Like it's still that dichotomy. No,
right.
no. The right wing, they're the only ones who are like that.
A few days ago, we played this on Friday, so I won't play it again. Like I said, I don't want to torture this too much, right? But we played this on Friday. You, just a few days ago, just last week, were looking at an interview with a Trump supporter who said, I want, Trump shares my values and I want to be able to raise my kids the way I want. You insisted to Ana, even after she started pushing back, you insisted that values and raise my children were code words for I hate gay people or I hate trans. So the idea that you're fostering this spirit of like good faith debate is just absolute nonsense. This was not even a week back.
Well, and also
not even a week back.
Look at the stupidity of that premise. It's so you don't want the state to be particularly involved in the raising of your children, and
right.
I mean that's kind of the default position of most people, not only in this country, I think in any country, right? I mean, don't most people want to be the greatest influence in their child's life? Do most people want to defer to the state on the raising of their children?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's a pretty mainstream thing to jump from that to making the worst possible assumption about the person is something you do. You do it all the time. I just cited the most recent example, but that's been your MO for years and years and years. So now you say, well, some people on the right, they don't want debate. No. Some people on the right, you mean like guys like, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, who are the actual right. But then there are people who use smear as being on the right, who aren't on the right, like Jimmy Dore, who, when he interviewed one of those, what are the Hawaiian shirt guys? The
Boogaloo Boys.
Boogaloo Boys, that's right. He interviews one of them, and you immediately jump down and start. They did a whole 20-minute segment. Ana did a whole monologue. Jimmy is wrong about the Boogaloo Boys, and wrong to think that we can have a conversation with them. So come on, this is just absolute delusional, dishonest garbage that he's saying now.
You see the internal emails. Let's not tell people things that are true. Let's just tell the audience what they want to hear. Now, I was proud that the left wing didn't do that for a long, long time. We are open-minded, we're reasonable, we have conversations. But unfortunately, this...
Since when? Since when?
What are you talking about?
Not you guys. Again, Jimmy had a conversation with the Boogaloo Boy that went pretty well. That's an example of the left being open-minded. Right?
Exactly.
But you guys had a big problem with that.
That's not right. That's not your segment of the left.
Right.
Your segment of the left is exactly the segment that's now turning on you.
Right.
Which you helped to create. You helped to foster that atmosphere. That's why this split emerged with Jimmy Dore. If you're so open-minded, why did that get so acrimonious? For what reason? What did he do? Let's say the worst accusations you've made against him are true, that he went to the right. Okay, by what you're saying right now, you would have discussed it, right?
Right.
You're open-minded. You would have discussed it.
Glenn Greenwald goes on Tucker Carlson. Huge problems with that. Oh, he's a right winger now because he's going on Tucker. Right.
Aaron Mate. Oh, I hope your Russian blanket keeps you warm at night.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and especially
Matt Taibbi, right? They took Mehdi Hassan's side in that whole thing, right? When Matt Taibbi went to Mehdi. So the list goes on and on and on. It's not just Jimmy. It's all these people. Anyone who steps out of line, they would smear as a right winger. They would smear them as a right winger, and then they'd say, well, the right wing isn't open to debate. That doesn't even make sense.
Well, not only that, that is the worst of McCarthyite tactics. I never understand anyone who claims to be on the left, because such a formative experience of the left, something in America, something that lives so much in its collective psyche and memory, even for people who are not, which most are not, old enough to have experienced it, is the McCarthy hearings and the evils of the McCarthy hearings. It's a core parable about the excesses of smearing people as traitorous for their opinions among people who consider themselves left. It never ceases to amaze me how many people who call themselves left fell right into the same language without ever noticing how much they sound exactly like the people from the mid-50s. They sound exactly like they took a time machine from that period. Yeah, you disagree with Aaron Mate's reporting? debate him. Debate him. Why do you have to smear him and question his motives?
Right. Exactly. I see a lot of people in the chat commenting that I'm hitting the pause button at good times to get good looks on Cenk's face. Cenk is the kind of guy where that's pretty easy to do.
Like what pause could he hit that would miss that?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Point, there are some forces that say no. There should be no discussion. There is a correct opinion, and everyone should be forced to have that correct opinion. Or they should be canceled or fired, or no one should watch them, or all these other consequences that flow from that. Well, God bless. There's really good news because there's tons of leftist shows now that never disagree with a preset so-called leftist ideology. They agree with 100% of the issues 100% of the time, and they almost all do it, right? You sure they're honest with you that they agree with whatever is the trend of the day 100% of the time? By the way, they could prove me wrong. They could say, oh yeah, I don't agree with the left on this, and this, and see, nobody canceled me, everybody's fine. Now they're gonna do try benign things like, oh yeah, well I like orange more than I like yellow. No. Give me real disagreements.
Okay, well, this is interesting. This is actually an interesting piece of it because Cenk and Ana stepped in it a lot with the Rick Caruso stuff, with the crime stuff and the homelessness stuff.
Right, yeah.
But they were able to ride that out to the point where maybe he felt they could survive Ana saying she wants to be called a woman, right? But no,
that's the third rail.
That is the third rail. You don't have the same leeway with that you do with talking about crime and homelessness, which, by the way, are much further to the right. Like, it's actually a right-wing position to back the right-wing real estate landlord mayoral candidate, right, over the further left candidate. I mean, I don't think any of those candidates were any good in that race. But, like, that's actually a more provable, like, right-wing standpoint.
Right.
A woman saying she prefers to be called a woman over a birthing person, that's not indicative of any kind of malice. So maybe they thought that they could get away with that, but they obviously can't, right? And so you pushed it to a point where you couldn't, and maybe you didn't realize that. Maybe you took that for granted. But then again, you really shouldn't have been taking that for granted because you've been making so many of these reductive, shallow arguments on that issue as well.
Well, and as we showed on Friday, Cenk was arguing that his one exception to gun control is trans people a few months ago. Right. Because there's this apocalyptic mob after them and they need to be able to fight it off with guns.
Right.
That is how fucking crazy the rhetoric that you have encouraged around this topic has been. Now, did you really think that? I don't think so. When I watch Cenk, I see a performer. I see a carnival barker. I see a guy who puts his finger in the air and feels where the wind is blowing. Notice he's not the one who really went off the reservation. It was Ana.
Yeah.
Now, then he went and felt it out with the sports. There he got into the sports question. And I think you're right. They thought that they had more leeway than they did, which, look, that raises its own questions. Why these issues have become so much more salient than homelessness, than backing a right-wing mayoral candidate, wanting to be called a birthing person. And we showed, I mean, Brianna, she's a smart woman. She sounded batshit fucking crazy with her yellow and white paper. Like, the fact that, I mean, that is part of what this is bringing out. These other positions they took, which, and a lot of people have pointed this out too. So smearing Aaron Mate was not a red line for people. Right. Smearing Glenn Greenwald was not a red line. Smearing Taibbi was not a red line. That's a red line. Birthing person is the fucking red line. That's the red line. Asking, questioning trans people in sports, which most people in the country are not good with. He's right about that. I mean, he's not wrong. Now, yes, they brought this on themselves. The big question, I mean, with Ana, it seems like this assault led her down an alley, right? Cenk, I don't know. I don't get it. Because what he's saying here is true. Because of the audience they've cultivated, this doesn't really make any business sense for them. Like, to call it a grift, he's right. I mean, to who? Who's he grifting to? He's not going to get the Daily Wire audience. They're not coming over to the Young Turks. There's already a Daily Wire. So what would the motive be? I think you're right. I think they felt they had more freedom of movement than they had. Right. And hey, man, payback's a bitch. This is your karma, man. There's your karma.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think there's also an element of him feeling he's got to stand by his co-host, by his partner. That, right. Because you really have no choice. I mean, what are you going to do? Fire her and say, okay, never mind that. I mean, that doesn't look good. Right. And there's also, I think, a big part of this of him. You know, he's a businessman. You know, like he is a capitalist first. He's a businessman first.
Yes.
Right. He has rebranded this project of his several times in the past.
Yeah.
Do not discount that he can do it again in the future. That's what I'm saying.
That guns thing, I don't think he thinks that. I think that was a performance. He does a lot of performing for the crowd. And now the crowd's coming for him. I think he's also an arrogant fuck. And he's offended that the crowd is coming and turning on him. This crowd that he created in a certain sense. And he's trying to muscle it back into its place.
Yeah, I think so too.
You're not going to do it, are you? Because you're worried. Well, we are going to do it on this network. So we do things like, hey, I do something that is almost unheard of in media. I hire people who disagree with me. And so some have disagreed on the right, some have disagreed on the left, and then they have come out and not only disagree with me massively on our air, and I'm totally okay with it. Totally okay with it. And then they will sometimes go over the edge and say vicious and crazy things, and we're still okay with it. And then and then you guys know that recently someone who we liked and really supported, etc., decided to call me an evil person, a racist, a trans.
He's talking about Benny, the trans woman who quit recently.
Pathetic, embarrassing, all these terrible, terrible, terrible things. And then they quit. And after they quit, they say, I quit because this guy who runs the company won't agree with me. But sister, I platformed you. I said, here's a platform, go for it. And not only can you say anything you want, you can say something that totally and utterly disagrees with me. Not good enough.
Well, no, it's not good enough because when you disagree on those kinds of issues, that is a different form of disagreement in the eyes of the people who care most passionately about those kinds of issues. Ron Placone just went on the Vanguard show. I just saw it before we turned on, and started saying, well, there's nothing like if you think it's reasonable to deny trans people the right to exist. I said right there, stop. Nobody is saying that at all. Cenk is not saying that at all. The two disagreements around this issue have to do with sports and minors, right? Should trans people be competing in the same sporting categories and leagues as biological women, biological men, and should impressionable teenagers be allowed to, get, permanently, life-altering surgery or hormone treatments or things like that. Those are the two disagreements within this left of center space. Now you get into the Matt Walsh stuff where he refuses to call people by their pronouns that they want. And he says, well, basically, no, they don't have the right to be recognized. That's a different animal. That's not what you're talking about here. Right. That's not what you're talking about here. When you're talking about on the left, those are the two areas. So nobody is threatening anyone's right to exist. Nobody is even saying anybody should suffer any discrimination. It's just these two very niche issues, these two sort of sub-issues within the issues. Big picture, yes, all for trans rights. That's what Cenk even says there. But he doesn't understand. I genuinely think he was surprised by just how militant the pushback would be for stepping an inch out of line. Because maybe he thinks of himself as some intellectual who's cultivating an enlightened audience. Because don't forget, the libs are like that. The libs fancy themselves the smart people. Right? Libs fancies themselves intellectuals who are capable of discussing ideas.
Nuance.
They're not, but they like to think of themselves in that way. So maybe he read a little bit of his own press, right? Bought a little bit of his own bullshit and thought, well, we can be reasonable on this issue, just like we could be reasonable on the crime issue in his mind. I don't think he's particularly right about the crime issue, obviously, but, because he was given a little bit of room to wiggle there, maybe he thought he'd be afforded that same luxury here. And no such luck when it comes to this.
Is that a standard? That everyone has to agree with just one of the hosts? Well, if that's the standard and two hosts disagree, what am I going to do? Well, I'm for, apparently the new standard is everyone must agree. So who do I fire? Which of the two hosts that disagree?
Oh, now you're getting
it.
it.
Twitter.
Right,
now you're getting it. Right. Now you're getting what you've created.
Exactly.
Yes, you see, when you create an environment where if you disagree, you're a monster.
Right. Right.
Well, now when you have a disagreement with people you've trained and encouraged to think that way, guess who the monster is now? You.
Right. Boom. Very simple. Couldn't have said it better.
And ask the left-wing activists or the ones pretending to be activists for our side, okay, guys, since apparently no one voted, but apparently you guys are the arbiters of what's on the left, despite the fact that the polling shows that you are not. You're often very, very, very wrong. Yeah, I'll give you the classic example, Latinx. I was told 100 times, oh, you are being against, you're going against the Latino community. It's like, I don't think so. I've never seen a Latino person call themselves Latinx. I think you made that up. They're like, how dare you, right? And it turns out we did a poll, or we didn't do it, somebody did. 96% of Latinos don't want to be called Latinx.
Right.
Did anyone learn from that? That maybe.
Right. Yeah.
The PMC AOCs do.
Right. The PMC AOCs.
Everybody else, no.
Don't want to be called Latinx. Did anyone learn from that? That maybe randos online don't actually know what they're talking about and that they don't actually speak for that community? But even if they did, or.
Okay, but again, and look, he's not the only guilty party in this. Who is the audience of independent YouTube media? Randos online. Like, yeah, that's your audience.
Hello.
Right. You can't be too dismissive of the online randos. The online randos are your bread and butter, my friend. So, like, if you want to play this game, you know, you have to be willing to take a punch every now and then, especially when your co-host commits the mortal sin of asking to be called a woman.
How dare she?
That's how ridiculous this space has become in your corners of it. We went through a little bit of it with our audience, right? Where we used to get a lot of pushback in the chat and in the comments when we talked about this stuff. You just stick it out and be true to yourself, and you ride it out. And eventually it works out where now we can do these and the audience is cool. They're fine. The problem is see, the thing is for us, unlike with TYT, we haven't been putting on this show for the last 6 years and sort of cultivating the complete opposite environment. Right. You know, people come here on the chat. People have it out on the chat all the time here. I notice it, argue with each other pretty vehemently, right? Pretty passionately. Next time they come back, they say hi, right? Like that's how you actually foster the kind of environment that you're now pretending you've tried to create these past 6 or 7 years, which you obviously haven't.
No, that's what I always found with my theater companies. What you project, that's what you're going to cultivate, right? Like the people in my company tended to reflect my temperament, my taste, so things were pretty chill, right? It's the same thing. It comes from the top. It comes from what you're projecting, because your like attracts like. If you're open and not censorious and willing to have conversations and curious and not interested in putting people in a box in a corner and this one's evil and this one's a monster. If that's not what you're about, people who are looking for that are going to leave pretty quickly, right? I mean, that's what happened. That's why we don't really have that problem. When we were new, a lot of people just assumed, well, somebody on the left is going to say birthing people, right? And when we were like, no, we're not fucking playing that game. We're not doing that. And we are going to question that. If you remember, you had some people who were outraged, right? Who, they're gone now, right? Or they accepted that there's going to be some disagreement if you're going to come on this channel, and you have to be okay with that.
Oh, yeah. I recognize names who are still in the chat now who gave us a lot of hell when we did that Riley Gaines segment. They're still here. Right. That's great. That's awesome. We love that. We don't want anybody to leave.
Right. We're not like, get the fuck out of here, you fucking asshole, you disagree. Cenk, you've been doing this shit for 20 years. Well, you weren't doing that. You were pimping Anna out for shoes at the mall
exactly.
back when you started. But you've been doing this for a good long time now, What did you expect? And honestly, I mean, he's reminding me of Eric Bogosian at the end of Talk Radio, right? Like that was the upshot, that he realized what a bunch of freaks and weirdos and monsters his audience were, and how he was partly responsible for creating the atmosphere of paranoia and strangeness that they sat in, right? That in the end, that's what he created, and now he's stuck with it, right? Like that. This feels like that. It feels like the end of Talk Radio, where Cenk is forced to realize that what he created is this world of socially misaligned freaks.
Yeah. And here's speaking of the end, here's the end of this. This is the winning line here.
We were wrong, etc. The most important thing is, will we have disagreement, and will that be allowed? And the answer definitively on the Young Turks is yes. And if you don't like that, like I said, there's a billion options, right wing, left wing, and they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. But if you want to have a real conversation, an honest conversation, there's one place in media.
Wow.
There's one place in media to have the real, honest conversation. One place.
And that's
one place. That's TYT. One place to have a real, honest debate and conversation. Like I said, 4 fucking days ago. Oh, well, he's just saying he wants to know how to raise his kids. That's code for I hate gay people.
Right.
I mean, just
well, that's so ingrained in their style. I don't even know if they would be able to stop. Like that's so reflexive for them.
Please clap.